as people are continuing to join us. So on behalf of the BCO and the BCO NextGen, I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar on developing the Helix. We've got an incredible panel of speakers today, which we hope is going to provide a great overview of the latest phase of the Helix development, which is the Lumen building. I'd like to give a huge thanks to each of our speakers as well, who are going to be providing a landlord, architectural and occupier perspective on what has driven this latest phase of development and what makes it special. So joining us, we've got Ben Rogers from Legal and General, got Tom Warburton from Newcastle City Council, got Johnny C. Backer from Ryder Architecture, and Janine King from Homes England, who've taken space at the Lumen building. We've also got joining us Andrew Bell from XAB Architects, who worked with Homes England on the client-side design of that scheme. So thank you all. So last and certainly not least, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in today. Obviously, as we are getting to some renewed normality, these webinars are becoming, I guess, a little less easy to join as pubs and restaurants are open. And on a Thursday afternoon, your time is very much appreciated. If you want to see each person as they're speaking, I'd recommend going on to Speaker View. And then please feel free to ask questions as we move through the presentation, and then we can field those at the end. I guess most of you will be a dab hand at that by now, but there's a Q&A section which is just at the bottom, so you can click on there and just register your questions as we move forward. So we'll kick off now. So first up, we've got Tom Warburton from Newcastle City Council, who's going to tell us all about the vision for the Helix and how the area is being regenerated. Over to you, Tom.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give a brief overview of the site, those of you not familiar with it. So Newcastle Helix is a 24-acre site in pretty much in the middle of Newcastle. It was the brewery site, and before the brewery, it was coal mines. It's been a long project. The site was bought from Scottish and Newcastle Brewery in 2005. And without going through the endless history, we now have a development platform. We have planning permission, and there's about 11 buildings now either built or in progress at some point. To the left of your screen now, you'll see there's is the residential area. Around the square in the middle is 3 buildings, which are the university's buildings, which are all of which are now built now. And the building that we're going to be discussing mostly in this webinar is at the front of the site, on the right of your picture now. The visions for the site really was to create a mixed-use new quarter of the city. It's a very rare opportunity to have 24 acres in the middle of the city, but also to make it a sort of innovation zone, a science park for want of a better phrase, but in the city, more denser development than an out-of-town science park. And particularly the university research expertise on the site is critical to that. And we have both the National Innovation Centre for Data and the National Innovation Centre for Ageing on the site in the same building. And we have the university's computing department and engineering expertise on site as well, both of which are attractive to occupiers of the commercial sector. So I won't say too much more about it. The council, the regional development agency and the university were the prime movers in this. The share of the regional development agencies then became the council's. And at a certain point in the development, we looked to bring in private sector partner. And that's when we struck a commercial arrangement and a partnership arrangement with Legal and General. And they've become both our financial partner on the site, but also, in Ben's case, who will follow me, a development manager of a large part of the site as well. So we'll probably get questions on the wider site as well, but the idea with this webinar was really to concentrate on the Lumen building, so that I'll probably stop there and just hand across to Ben, who'll just say a little bit about L&G's involvement.
Thanks, Tom. Morning, everybody. I'm Ben Rogers. I'm sort of head of regeneration at LNG Investment Management. So I thought it would be useful just to give a little bit of background about why LNG sort of got involved in this scheme and what sort of made it really sort of exciting to us. I mean, I think going back to sort of Tom's point about this, the sort of the partnership, LNG probably sort of 5 or 6 years ago set up a sort of a fund using its own balance sheet capital, with one of its sort of stated aims was to try and help regenerate UK towns and cities. But we wanted to do that not sort of in a piecemeal manner. We actually wanted to do this in a sort of a large scale sense to try and maximise the benefit of doing that. We already knew Newcastle Council and the university a little bit, and we sort of spent quite a bit of time building up a sort of a partnership model, as Tom mentioned, to bring this scheme forward. And it's quite an innovative model regarding sort of sharing risk and reward to bring forward as much as possible. And I think the real sort of crux of this was, you've got a large sort of 24-acre site. How do we actually make it happen and not sort of leave half of it sort of to come at a later stage for viability reasons, whatever? And the model we managed to sort of hit upon sort of neatly solved a lot of those problems. And it's been fantastic. It's been a great partnership. Obviously, the Lumen was the first of the commercial buildings that we brought forward on the scheme. We're now bringing forward a second office building called the Spark, which is completing at the end of this year. And I think ultimately why it's been really successful is just due to the fact that you've got three parties who've got their own sort of vision and driver for what we're trying to do here, but ultimately we're all very well sort of matched. We're all combined with the same vision and ethos of actually what we're trying to achieve with this. And it's sort of spanning now. It's almost more than just the physical delivery of the assets and the different buildings on the site. It's actually what can we do now to work together to look at some of the things that the university are creating through their research and everything else, to actually sort of tailor space for future occupiers, people starting out, and all sorts of different sort of business models. So it's been really, really exciting. And actually Newcastle, I would say, from an LNG perspective, has probably been the benchmark of what a successful scheme looks like. And I think what we've been trying to do really is replicate this around other sort of towns and cities around the UK as well. But I think Newcastle has always stood as our sort of base case of the one we always go back to as being the model of a fantastic partnership project. So I think there's probably not much more I want to really say on that today. But so I'll hand back to Alex now, but obviously any questions further, happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Ben. That's great to be. I've certainly got some questions I'll probably feel myself at the end. You can ask questions in the Q&A section, but if any come through in chat as well, we will ask those at the end, but feel free to put those in as we move along. So I'd like to introduce next, we've got Johnny Seabacker from Ryder Architecture, who have worked with the development team on designing the buildings across the Helix. The latest one's been the Lumen, and then forthcoming the Spark. So Johnny and the team have actually had some Matterport scanning done within the Lumen building, which is a great new technology many of you are probably aware of. But Johnny's going to use that to talk through the building, the vision for the design, and yeah, looking forward to seeing this. So over to you, Johnny.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. Alex, would you mind just sharing the slide of the exterior of the building, just so people can see what it looks like from the outside before we dive into the Matterport? Next slide in true government fashion.
There we go.
There we go. Thanks very much. I thought it was just worth setting the scene with a sort of external view there. And we'll share the presentation, we'll share the Matterport after today's session, but that just that's a great shot of the building, obviously completed now. It was handed over just at the start of lockdown in March 2020, and that's obviously a view in the evening. As Tom said, the building sits right at the front of Helix. It's probably one of the first buildings you see when you arrive on site, and sort of forms a gateway to the rest of the development. Just at the bottom bottom of that shot, it's just cropped off. But again, we'll share that on the image. You can just see the old sort of stonework of the old brewery with the old blue star embossed in it. So the square in front of the Lumen, Blue Star Square, sort of pays homage to the, I guess, historical context from which the site's been developed. And then, as you can see, the building comprises of it's a 7-story building. It sits on a double, and in some spaces triple height ground floor to deal with the quite complex site levels. And then we worked really hard with, particularly with Ben and his team, and obviously Tom's team at the City Council, to really create something that was quite sort of striking, but really elegant, really simple, really rigorous, and something that could stand the test of time and look as fresh in 20 years as it does now. You know, and this was a hugely important building for Helix in terms of its aspirations to become at the forefront of sort of business quarter for the city, but also a major building for the city. It's probably the first major office building of its kind in Newcastle city centre for probably 10 or 15 years. So, you know, we were all very cognizant of the importance of the scheme. And hopefully everyone agrees it's come out really well. I think everyone's worked and collaborated really well, from clients through the contractor to really deliver the vision of the building in terms of how that sits in the wider context of Helix. So I will dive into the Matterport survey and just show you how the building works really internally. Share that. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. You see that? Yeah, seen some nods, so that's good. So as I said, we've got a piece of kit at Ryder, Matterport scanner, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, but we're using it more and more frequently now on jobs for various different reasons. We've used it on this job, obviously, to share the Lumen building with you today. As you come in off what's known as Drayman's Way, through the sort of large entrance space, they're the steps. That's the square that I just mentioned on the external image. You come into a really impressive double height lobby space, which has, you know, waiting area, reception desk, control point, etc. Polished concrete floor. We wanted to go for quite a sort of a modern, clean, but almost industrial type feel in terms of the external, and bring that colour through the interior, where we see these glazed panels, which have a bronze interlayer built in, and again the bronze tones, etc. The bronze tones of the buildings on the outside paying homage to the industrial past of the site. But you come into this space in the fullness of time. The space on the right hand side here, as you come through, just screened off at the moment while fit outs are ongoing. But this will become a bar cafe space, which will link through to reception. And you probably picked up the undercroft on the exterior there. There's a great space there, which will link to the Spark in the fullness of time, which create a really sort of vibrant. There's a big leisure and retail strategy that complements everything at Helix, and it'd be great to see this come alive once the sort of world returns to some kind of normality. So those works are ongoing at the minute. As we spin back around, obviously we see reception, and as we come across reception, we see the first of the big office spaces. And again, this is a flexible space. We worked hard with the city to get planning permission, not only for an office in this space, but also leisure and retail. So whilst it's sort of the Cat A is ready for an office configuration, equally this can be turned into a bar, a restaurant, and the levels are such that it's double height of this space. So from an office point of view, that's quite unique. It's some great feedback from the market, but it's also got soft spots in the floor, and that can link to the space below. But even at this ground floor level, such are the nature of the site levels, you really feel elevated above the ground plane, which gives it quite a unique feel inside. And you already start to get great views. Hadrian's Tower outside, a building people might be familiar with, sort of new resi block, which is probably the tallest building in Newcastle. You see the back of the Helix there, and there's a planning permission in place at the moment for a hotel at the back. So that will be coming forward later this year. A great space. And then, as I said, this links to another space downstairs, which if we just go down the stairs quickly, again, you'll be able to get a feel for what that space is downstairs. So it's almost, the nature of the levels was such as we've got this lower ground space almost for free by virtue of the site. So again, just really interesting space. And as I said, that can be linked to the floors above. It's got its own WCs, etc. We've talked to the City Council about creating maybe an incubator unit with a cafe space in here with access off the street. So there's a lot of potential in terms of how that may be used going forward. If I just skip to the other side of the core, in the basement, again, as you come into the basement, there's all the back of house facilities are located in this ground floor area. And if I go through these doors, I think cycling, pedestrian movement, well-being, all of that was of critical importance to everyone working on the job. So anyone arriving by bike or by foot, whether they've been for a run at lunchtime, they've got card access straight from the back of the building, brings you into a corridor. And from that, you can access straight into cycle stores. We've got stores for 110 bikes, which are double stacked in this space. So you can come straight in off the street. You can get rid of your bike, get rid of your gear. There's changing rooms through this space, which are sort of, I guess, what we would call it, almost a health club spec in terms of how they feel. So you've got rid of your bike, you've got rid of your gear, you're straight into a generous changing room. Male and female are exactly the same. There's showers, there's a lot of facilities, changing facilities, vanity areas, hair dryers, everything you would expect. And then you've got access via the lifts or the stairs straight back to wherever you need to be within the building. Typical floor plate, again, critical importance to get this right. We worked really hard with Ben and the team and with the agents who are on this job at Cushman and Wakefield and Avison Young. We've created a floor plate here, which is 15,000 square foot. And that was really in response to the market. The market required large, uninhibited floor plates to give maximum flexibility, but could also be split down in three ways, 5,000 square foot floor plates, which is a kind of, from the sort of market intel, that's the typical size requirement in Newcastle for a sort of tech startup, which is, I guess, one of the primary focuses of Helix. Again, floor to ceiling glazing, try to bring some of that colour, texture and material through to the floor plate itself, which I think just adds that, makes it a bit more special than, you often just see a standard white panel in these spaces. The exposed surfaces, the exposed soffit just give us that extra volume. You've got 2.85 clear to the underside of steel, and that allows us to put a ceiling in if a tenant wants a ceiling down in the future. But we're finding most buildings we're doing in this sector, which I'm sure people will be aware of, really going for the exposed aesthetic at the moment. And then on to the upper floor plates as well, we created these really nice little inset balconies so people can get outside, enjoy some fresh air. I think that would be even more important in a post sort of COVID environment, and taking the view and meet with colleagues, etc. And then everything's served by this central core. So again, we've got the fire strategy working really hard for us. So there's no other stair cores or anything on the floor plate other than the central core itself, which is served by sort of three glass doors which open out, and then we're into the lift lobby. So you've got a sort of a main front of house entrance, I guess, to the floor plate. But then depending on how the split works, depending on how the tenants want to fit it out, there's an access from each side. Destination control lifts bring you to the floor. And then obviously this core replicates throughout the building. And then again, just a quick peek, slightly odd going in the toilet, but we'll do it anyway. Again, male and female. And again, working with Ben and the agents, we looked at a lot of buildings. We looked at a lot of new schemes in London, some of the things Ben had worked on in London, just to make sure the spec was really sort of, really top of the class in terms of where this office is trying to pitch itself on a regional, but also at a national level. So that's how that works. If we just spin down the first floor, we start to get a flavour of what some of the tenant fit outs are like. So one of the first tenants that came to Lumen was Savills. So Savills had an office on Grey Street, the other part of town. They've taken sort of half a floor plate, and this just gives you a flavour of what the opportunity is, I guess, with having such a flexible floor plate in terms of how they fit it out. So, nice client arrival space, excellent meeting room facilities that they've decked out, and then really sort of flexible open space beyond that. And then they share part of this floor with Homes England, who have, I guess, Janine can pick up later, but on this floor they have more of their sort of collaboration spaces, I guess, some large meeting room spaces. Again, we'll just go through the entrance so you start to see the fit out. Side on the left has been taken by another occupier. We expect the fit out of that to start soon, and then we get a glimpse into some of Homes England's collaboration space. Again, come through here. Homes England have done a really impressive fit out. So as we come down with Overbury, so we'll come down, we've got some waiting area, perch bars, taking the view over the square, and then more of a sort of a lounge and a formal area. But again, I think testament to the flexibility of the Cat A has given Homes England and Overbury maximum flexibility in terms of how they fitted out that Cat B. And then if we go upstairs to Homes England's main floor, again, straight off that lobby space, really impressive entrance space, which you'll see on a video in a moment. And then just space clustered around. There's meeting rooms, there's formal lounge space, there's all the back of house facilities, storage, coffee bars, etc. Loads of different workplace settings for people to do the right job in the right type of space. So if they need to collaborate, they can collaborate. If they need quiet time on their own, space affords them the opportunity to do that. Desks around the perimeter. Start to get great views over Blue Star Square out of this window, the core development. Just march down. Again, another sort of hot desking and waiting area behind reception. And then we start to get a view of the wider Helix from the north here. So looking at the Spark development, which is on site, the last remaining site of the sort of western framework, which will be a built to rent site, and you get a glimpse of some of the university buildings, the energy centre, car park and hotel, which are on site at the moment. But really flexible spaces we can't around the floor plate, so works really well. And I'm sure Homes England will be chomping at the bit, as it were, to get all their staff back in there once the world returns to normal, which hopefully will be very soon. So that's a very quick trawl through the Matterport. We will we'll share this after the session. We'll send a link round. The link contains links embedded with it to the brochure, the website, if people want to find out more. That's it, just a very quick look through, and I'll pass back to Alex and Janine.
Johnny, that's excellent. Thank you. Really, really impressive bit of technology. Nice to see it showcased. And if I can ask a question, just on the amount of time it took to do the scan of the building, how long did that take?
It took one of our guys. I'm not going to pretend I did it myself because I wouldn't know where to start. But it took one of our guys about a day and a half to do the whole building with the technology. I think once you're familiar with the technology, it kind of does it itself. It's just the waiting time, and as you move the equipment around, and it just links to an app on your phone and glues it all together for you. So it's a really good bit of kit. We're using it more and more for not just post-completion stuff. It's really beneficial for refurb work, that kind of thing, doing digital surveys at an early stage to understand a building and a space. So great bit of kit.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate you making it available as well after the event. That's great. Right. So without further ado, I'm going to next hand over to Janine King from Homes England. Before I do that, I'm just going to share my screen just to show a little bit of a video of the space to give some context over their workplace. To make sure my sound is on. Right, can you guys see that in the lift lobby? just close that. So yeah, so obviously Homes England taking a significant amount of space within the building, and I think the period in which the project has happened is quite significant as well, which Janine will be able to tell us about. Obviously happening during the pandemic, really, from I'll say start to finish. We can't say finish, obviously, but yeah, Janine, if you yeah, like to tell us about your experience and how things changed during the period.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible space. We'll be looking forward to getting in there, and we've got minimal staff in there at the minute. At Homes England, we're an executive agency, as our name suggests. We're delivering homes, but I suppose that's kind of part of what we do. Is we're unlocking land, we're supporting and building relationships with local authorities, with developers, things like that. So the relationships we need means where we put our offices is quite important, and we look to support those kind of areas like the Helix, where there's massive regeneration, because that then brings the investment for the housing that we want to bring in, and it opens up that land, as it were. Why Lumen, I suppose, was we were based in Gateshead, in a very old public sector cellular kind of building. That's a beautiful building, but it's not modern at all for kind of even for modern ways of working pre-COVID. So the intention was to sell that building and find a new home for us. The levelling up agenda with government is looking to get government departments to move more of their departments into kind of Midlands and North anyway, and we've got most of our kind of corporate services were based in Gateshead. So the intention was we were kind of ahead of the curve anyway on that, in looking to expand our digital team and our corporate services in the Northeast. And we're looking for a space. Saw the Lumen, beautiful building, modern. The fact that it was that relationship of supporting the council as well in their requirement, and their being on site as well. So it was looking for that kind of space, as it were, and the ability, being brand new, to create a large open floor plate that allows for a lot of flexibility was what we were kind of looking for. So even with the pre-COVID design, it was very open plan anyway. It was not too dissimilar in the build piece to what we see now. So we had the sort of build off the central core, and then a lot of open spaces because of the amount of glass. You kind of have to put storage around the kind of central core, but you also have all those views that you don't want to lose by putting up partition walls and things, and having the exposed surfaces, the M&E, all of that we wanted to keep. You know, it was kind of that industrial look and feel we were looking for right at the beginning anyway. There was that intention. It also makes it easier if you don't put up partition walls. You don't have to deal with ventilation issues and things like that. So a lot of the meeting rooms are cell pods, as it were, and then connected into the HVAC system. But it just made it a bit easier. But it was also not wanting to put those walls up. It was wanting to keep that feel of a big open space. So we were with Overbury ready to effectively start works just before we went into lockdown. So everything was, the plans were finished, complete, the furniture was ready to be ordered, Overbury were ready to get on site, and then we hit the first lockdown, and it was just, oh my gosh, okay, what do we do now? And very early on, kind of, I realized when we went into lockdown and what was going on, a lot of it, the understanding was actually this is an opportunity that things are going to change forever with regards to how we work in an office, what an office is for. And because we had that opportunity to pause, with the Architect SAB, we kind of looked at, and my sort of purpose was, okay, we need to relook at this space and find a new way of working, but a very flexible way of working So the floor plate has been designed with that collaborative, very kind of agile space, straight away stripped out desks. And that's probably the most controversial thing, is we're about 20% capacity of desks. So it's really, and it's quite a drop from what we were originally. But it was straight away, are people going to come back and sit at a desk? Not necessarily. That's not a good use of your space. And actually, will that be what people want? And we were looking for that kind of better use of a space. So the intention was make it, and the way to sell it was to make it as flexible as possible. So we've got areas that we kind of presented to the exec saying, this can be desks if we want it to be, but we can put this furniture in now and create those kind of workshop zones, the big spaces that can be touchdown, can be workshop, can be training, can be town hall, your more agile kind of spaces for your digital teams with your big whiteboards, which are effectively entire walls. A lot of focus rooms. So that is the other thing that I kind of added on, was more of these smaller video booths, phone calls, things like that, because much as we're all kind of realizing video conferencing ain't going anywhere, it's going to be part of our day-to-day. And if you're in the office and you want to join a meeting, you can do. So it's quite a different space. It's a very I don't know whether, can you bring up the plan, Alex, just to kind of give a visual of what the floor plate was. So we've got the whole of the second floor.
Certainly can.
And
Take it back.
Yeah, that's
There we
it. Perfect. So we've got the whole of the second floor, and then we've got about a third, we're just next to Savills on the first floor. So a lot of the spaces were, the first floor was mostly a big, what we kind of call boardroom, conference room previously, and then a shed load of desks with a small cafe. And that's kind of the biggest shift, is that that's become an event space. So it can be a creative lounge, it can be a cafe space, it can be used for bigger events or bigger workshops, it can be booked as one whole space, or can just be touchdown quiet, so depending on what people need. So this is a really flexible kind of space. And then the second floor, we've got the large cafe, and then you've got sort of your quieter lounge, which is on the kind of left hand side, and then you've got your agile, which is on the right hand side. And both of these have got a glass and then acoustic panel screening on them, just to try and buffer that sound, as it were. Because one of the things we couldn't do is we couldn't add in partition walls or any kind of greater acoustic treatment on this refresh. So it was more of a shuffle things about, as it were, rather than trying to completely change Overbury's specification. It was mostly kind of additions in that way. But I think it looks like a really good space. The central core is kind of your lockers and some additional built focus rooms, and then you've got some kind of side spaces on those as well, which is kind of a little team area and what have you. So yeah, hopefully when staff get back in there, I mean, it will be a massive shift for the staff, but actually they'll be coming from home for a year, possibly a year and a half. So it should be, that will be a completely different way of working for them, but probably for all of us. And the purpose is to attract some of the southern teams to come to the northeast and use it for their events as well. So it's trying to bring that collaboration across the whole of the organisation as well. So yeah, fingers crossed we'll be in soon.
Absolutely. Jeanine, that's immensely useful, thank you. And I think it's obviously good to know how things have changed during the pandemic, and you know, the tweaks to design and the layout, but also the reason you chose the building in the first place. I think that's really important to, you know, people who will be joining this call to understand those drivers really for choosing the building in the first place. So thank you. So we're just having a look at questions which are starting to come in. So we we had one at the nearer the start, which was about square foot costs of the building, which Ben has been good enough to give us an idea. So costs were circa £165 per square foot on the gross build. So hopefully that gives some idea. And I'll drop a text in to answer that as well. Yeah, if anybody wants to add some questions. Got the next one. It's a fine building, fit out adheres well to pre-COVID work style, but has an audit been undertaken as to how the pandemic has affected the way people will work, embracing virtual calls and the privacy acoustics required? So I guess we can answer this maybe in terms of the building, but also from an occupier point of view. So I don't know if Tom, Ben, or Johnny wanted to give an idea of how the building might cater for this, and then following that, Janine, about privacy and acoustics within the space.
I think, well, I think from a base build point of view, Alex, obviously this was built, COVID didn't exist when we're designing this building. Wasn't part of the brief, obviously, but I think what we've done is just try to create something that is as flexible as possible to allow, flexibility within fit outs to happen. And I think probably the Homes England one, notwithstanding if there's been an order or not, probably demonstrates how that works. I think the other thing is no one actually knows what's going to happen after this or how people are going to work. We don't know if there's a lot of people guessing what might happen, but I think the end result might be quite different. But we'll see. But I think ultimately it's about flexibility, and hopefully that's been demonstrated through what Homes England have been able to do with their Cat B.
Alex, can I just come in on the wider market across Newcastle on that?
Absolutely, please do. Yeah.
I mean, the building itself was built very flexibly, as Johnny says. Big floor plates that can be cut and deliberately made as flexible as possible, because we weren't sure what would we get occupiers that needed a whole floor or more, multiple floors, or just a third of a floor. So that was part of the brief on the building. But in the wider market, Newcastle's probably still short of grade A office space, even if all the businesses don't come back full time all the time. We have done some surveys. Part of the question was about surveys. We have done some surveys with our business improvement district, and at the moment it seems like most previously office-based businesses are probably going to a hybrid model. That's what they're telling us at the moment. And so that video conferencing and being in the office and collaboration space that Janine outlined seems to be the way people are thinking at the moment. But we're pretty confident that we still haven't overbuilt grade A offices in Newcastle, and there will be return to cities. It's probably going to be hybrid, though. People will maybe work at home a bit and work in the office a bit. So the fit out of Homes England is a great move. It was very fortuitous, really, that Janine and her colleagues had time to just pause and rethink. And I guess there's still flexibility in the space as well, Janine. If it doesn't quite work, obviously you've purchased the furniture and that, but there's still the opportunity to kind of move it around a bit and adapt. So that's how I would answer that question.
Really
Yeah.
good.
Well, I think
I
I was just going to add in, Alex, that sort of on a sort of a more national basis, sort of what we're seeing, because obviously L&G has a fairly large portfolio of offices, and we're obviously developing a lot as well. So what we're sort of seeing really is just kind of, it's a slow evolution. I think everyone's trying to wait and see what will happen. As sort of Tom said, it's going to be a hybrid model going forward. I think it's going to continue to be this kind of flight to quality, where I think fresh air, flexible spaces, adaptability is going to become more and more important. And I think the specification we sort of put onto the Lumen, I think, was already anticipating that there was a generational shift in how people occupy space and what people actually want from their workspaces. So I think we were already at the start of that curve. Obviously, it's become a very steep curve, and obviously we're all trying to learn from that. But I think the building was designed with adaptability in mind.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is the way we were able to effectively do a redesign within a matter of months was shows how adaptable kind of the building is, and how easy it was to do that. I'd say, I mean, it goes back to sort of the increase of the kind of focus rooms and the smaller, it's not so much your meeting rooms anymore, it's those smaller spaces that can allow you to kind of dial in. So you haven't got, I mean, I think noise was one of the biggest bugbears of the open plan office in the past anyway. It was just ignored. So the kind of focus room design of the Lumen was still in the pre-pandemic design. It's just we upped it. So it was the numbers were upped, and put a few more kind of acoustic treatments into spaces without doing full-on partition walls, as it were, knowing that a lot of people are going to be dialing into things throughout their working day, while if they are in the office, and there'll be other parts of their team that will be out of the office who will be joining by video link. So yeah, I think it was quite straightforward to do that shift and to do that install within the design of the Lumen, which was good.
That's really useful. Thanks everyone for your input there. I think it's a real positive. It seems as though everyone's in agreement. Well, I shouldn't answer this myself. I'll probably ask you. The desire for quality office space doesn't seem to be going down in any way, shape or form. From what you said there, Tom, certainly as a local authority and within the North East,
well, I would say if there's any potential occupiers on the call and listening, we'd be delighted to welcome you to Newcastle and rent a floor. I shouldn't miss a marketing opportunity. I need to pay Ben the rent.
And Ben, how you find out from a national perspective, and sort of the desire and demand from occupiers at the moment for quality office space, and how that is changing?
It's still to be decided, I think. Like, I mean, kind of at the moment, there's definitely a pause. I think particularly sort of larger corporates who were looking across the country at spaces or are sort of active in negotiations for spaces. There's certainly been a pause in some of those discussions that we're seeing. I think Newcastle is held up extremely well. And again, I think it sort of goes back to my earlier point that actually, I think for some occupiers now, I think they're realizing that some of the limitations of older space that isn't flexible is actually, you know, it's holding up their businesses and potential future sort of, you know, quality of staff, recruitment, and everything else. So actually that kind of getting ahead of the curve and actually, you know, adapting to, you know, future office needs. I think people are actually alive to that. So I think what we're seeing is that whilst there has definitely been a pause, I think now conversations are picking up again quite quickly.
That's good. Thanks, Ben. Really, really positive to hear that. Because I think, you know, as we're finding things move forward, that seems the level of amenity, the level of quality within the office space is becoming a reality, that's going up, you know, as spaces are changing. So that's great. And we had a question a little earlier on, which I'm going to go back to about the soffits in the building. So it says from Ben Freeman, thank you for your question, Ben. Hi, are the exposed composite metal deck soffits site painted or supplied pre-finished? Don't know if Johnny, if you want to field that one.
Yeah, they were site painted, sprayed on site once they were installed. We did look at pre-painting, but I think the logistics involved in getting them from factory to site, storage, etc. It was proving very difficult to make sure the quality was there. So they went in galvanized, they were made good on site, and then they were painted accordingly.
Lovely, thank you. And question from Alan West. You can see it there. I noted the energy centre, presumably doing the whole development. How are the sustainability metrics for the Lumen, EPC, net zero, BREEAM, air permeability, etc.? And were there predefined targets as part of the brief?
A bit of Johnny and a bit of me for this one, I think.
I think the energy centre, Tom can probably expand, the energy centre supplies the whole site. And I think the aspirations of the city are for it actually to to go beyond the site in the future. Building point of view, BREEAM excellent EPC rating of A. We didn't go down the net zero carbon route, but obviously having all the energy supplied on site was a great advantage. It's probably one of the key sustainability aspects of Helix, in that all the energy is supplied on site and then obviously drives the buildings. And then, as I said, I think they want to expand it, Tom.
Yeah, so as Alan's pointed out, there's an energy centre on site. We did as if we hadn't done enough complicated deals with L&G, we decided to do a complicated deal with NG. So we have a partnership agreement with for combined heat and power and cooling on site with NG that supplies all the buildings apart from the core at the moment, but we're probably going to add the core. And the energy centre itself at the moment is running on gas, but still delivers about a 40% reduction on CO2 from conventional. And the buildings, the energy centre building is kind of big enough to allow us to change the engines if technology advances in the future. And as Johnny said, we've overbuilt really the energy centre so that we can expand with heating pipes to other areas in this end of at the west of the city. And we've actually got projects in now where we're going to expand some of the heating pipe runs and the cooling pipe runs. And we did specify both the Lumen and the Spark, I think, Ben, were both specified to be grade A. There's also the other thing I'd mention is we specified quite a high IT kit at the beginning, which Johnny will have to help me with what the rating is, but which now with hindsight looked visionary, but because I think everybody's going to rely on fibre. So there's fibre right through the site and right through the building. I'll go back to Johnny.
Yeah, the building achieved wired score platinum.
Thank you. Wired score, that's it. That's why I'm not an architect.
Thank you very much. Question I've got might be useful for people joining the call are the next phases of the development. So obviously the Spark is the next building upcoming, but really what the future vision is for the next phases. If anybody wanted to give an idea of what that looks like.
I think,
Yeah.
well, Tom touched on it right on the end. I think the wider aspirations long term are to develop out the residential sort of half of the master plan. So there's a scheme that Ryder are involved with called Future Homes, which is all about future generational living. That will be on site, I think, later this year. That's got planning permission. Immediately next to Lumen, as you said, is Spark, which is another 110,000 square foot scheme, which we're doing for Legal and General. So that complements the Lumen. I touched on it on the fly through there. Behind Lumen is a Moxie Hotel, which is in for planning at the moment. I believe that's not one we're involved with, but I believe that will be on site later in the year. There's a multi-story car park on site. And then I guess the next sort of really significant scheme is Helix Built to Rent, which is another scheme we're developing with Legal and General, which I suppose will be the final part of the jigsaw, because the aspiration from the city was that this is it's a master plan for people, and it's somewhere that'll be active 365, 7 days a week, night and day. So by having the residential, the built to rent, the hotel on site, it really starts to sort of complement that holistic approach, which is what was always the original vision.
Yeah, just add. Oh, go on, Ben. You go.
No, I was just going to add into that to Johnny's comments that when we sort of, we're looking at sort of building out the master plan and looking at the phasing and it being that place for people to sort of, live, work, study, research. We were mindful also of people's experiences there. So it wasn't just going to be, we'll just build all of these individual buildings and focus on them and their primary use. We also wanted the experience of people who are going to be actually occupying the whole scheme. So it's very much it's a car-free area. We've got one multi-story, as Johnny mentioned, but the rest of it is very much pedestrian-centric. And and we undertook quite a lot of work on a strategy for sort of retail leisure, and how people are going to occupy the spaces, and actually identifying spaces within different zones within Helix for where we would have different units. We didn't want to just stick in, you know, a dozen cafes that were all going to compete with each other. We actually wanted to have different types of uses, primarily sort of trying to focus on more independent retail, trying to sort of, you know, promote that, and everything that sort of goes in with that, from sort of general stores to all sorts of different things. So that's, as it comes forward, each different phase of the scheme comes forward, obviously the actual physical areas where they can be housed are brought forward. So it's a slow sort of strategy rollout, but I think it's quite important to say that is a core part of it, because you see too many new builds that just, you know, because of a planning requirement, shove in a retail unit and it's just there hoarded up for the next sort of 5 years because you can't find a tenant to come into it. So we're very, very mindful on the experience of Helix for being a place for people as well.
Excellent. Tom, I think there's something you might want to add.
Well, just Ben said a lot of what I was going to say, but the only two sites that there's two commercial sites still not sort of identified what we'll exactly do with them, and then we're out to market for all the residential for a residential developer partner at the moment. So really, there's we are getting through it now that the buildings are either completed or they're in construction or in planning, apart from the residential and two commercial zones. That's it. And bearing in, I mean, it has been a long gestation period, but probably in the last 5 years that there was we've moved on about 11 plots, I think. So it's been quite rapid. Once we got going, it's been pretty rapid.
Impressive. I think it's creating a real critical mass, isn't it? You know, which great developments do. You know, you've got that residential aspect, you've got the commercial aspect, you've got the leisure, you know, all supporting it, you know, to create a great place for people. So fantastic. Janina, just on sort of people returning to the office space, how do you see that being phased as that moves forward as an occupier in terms of dates along with the roadmap? I don't know if that's something you're able to share at the moment.
I think like most people throughout our estate, we've had throughout this, we've had a central use only so our COVID kind of design, so our social distancing designs throughout the estate has given us between sort of 20 and 30% occupancy. That allows for people to come in and out that really need to, but we're still kind of work from home if you can, because that's government message. When we're looking at, I mean, this is a problem with the current roadmap, is that we've got a kind of 21st of June lift everything still sitting there, which is possibly may not happen, as it were. We're still working with the likelihood of some reduction in numbers, some social distancing, because we won't have large numbers of vaccination and what have you. So again, that makes it easier with an open floor plate, but because although we've got desking that you can screen and things like that, which we've done in other locations, you've also got a lot of kind of touchdown points that we can add to desk booking for a temporary solution, so we can give people day access and things while we're in a social distancing kind of environment. And then as you release, you can allow numbers to increase throughout the I think my intention with the Lumen was not to kind of strip it, whereas we did right at the beginning of the COVID lockdown, was we kind of stripped floor plates and literally went down to, you can only use this desk, and put furniture into kind of storage areas, as it were. We're kind of further on from that now, where we're a bit more trusting of people to use areas and clean down areas themselves and things like that. So hopefully we will start to see, we've started to see a request to go back in. I think more because we launched the bit, and we launched it by video, unfortunately. So it was a bit of doing the tour of the building like we've just done with all of our staff, me walking around the floor plate, showing them the what the space will be and how they will use it. So there's started to be an interest for staff to get back in. I think, I mean, the wider estate and when all the kind of retail and the cafes and all of that comes on board was one of the reasons we chose the location as well, is that it gives that whole environment for staff. But so for the longer term, it should be a great place to work on the Helix. And also being close to town centre. There's no parking or anything like that, so staff are using public transport, those kind of things, but it should be a good space. So we hope that there'll be a keenness to come back for a period, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. It will come, and it'll be a great space when people do. So no, thank you for that, Janine. So just as we've got just 1 minute left, and we've got one final question just coming from Francesca Harrison. So thanks, Francesca. What type of cladding is used on the Lumen? Probably best for you, Johnny, to field that one.
Yeah, it's just that it's all done in a curtain walling system. It's the whole building is wrapped in a curtain walling system, which is then obviously an interplay of glass and solid. So it's a solid aluminium panel, and then we worked with a company called Axalta, who some people might have come across, to develop the colour, which was we didn't want to go down an anodized route. So it's a special PPC that it sort of glistens in the sunlight was the idea, and we went through. Ben will tell you we looked at probably 300 different options to sort of get to where we were, because colour is such a subjective matter. But just quite a simple wrap in many respects. Just created a lot of depth and texture with the colour and the interplay of solid and glass.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I think that wraps us up nicely. So I want to once again thank everybody for joining us today. I know it's lovely weather out there. We're doing less of these webinars now as we are returning to the old normal. So thank you very much for your time today. And also on behalf of the BCO and the BCO NextGen, I want to thank our panelists for joining us as well, giving us their time. It's been really useful. And yeah, thank you. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.